What's going on, guys, and welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where I, Graham G.S. Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network. Today we're talking Chapter 3 of Undertaker: The Last Ride, entitled End of an Era. Now, if you haven't already checked out my Episode 1 and Episode 2, or rather Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 reviews of the show so far, definitely do so. They are in the description box down below right here on the channel in a specific playlist. If you have yet to see any episode of this show up to this point, first of all, why the hell are you listening to this? I mean, I appreciate the view. I appreciate you checking out the video. But what are you waiting for? Go back and watch the show. Chapters 1, 2, and 3 of the Taker Last Ride documentary are already up on the WWE Network. So the last two have gone up the last two Sundays. Today was no exception. Chapter 4, I will say right off the bat, will not be up, as WWE announced a while ago, until June 14th, I believe. So I think the day of Backlash, if not like earlier that morning, then right after the pay-per-view. Probably at 10 a.m. if the last... Episode 1 went up the day of Money in the Bank. They didn't wait until after the pay-per-view. It went up that morning. So you're going to have to wait until June 14th until Chapter 4 comes out. I think the fifth and final chapter, I know for a fact, actually, they've already said it, will drop on June 21st. That's Sunday. So a lot to look forward to. This episode was also great. It was the shortest episode to date. I think the first one was 55 minutes. The second one was 59 minutes, so just short of an hour, just shy of an hour, and then this one was 45 minutes. So a bit of a shorter watch, but still great stuff. So I really like, I don't know if I've already said this in my other two reviews of the show so far, but I really like how they've broken up this documentary over the course of 5 episodes. The first one was all about, well, in a nutshell, the last 10 years of matches that he's had, the streak getting broken, which they didn't go into too much depth about, which they didn't really need to. I feel like Taker has already talked about that a lot. I never thought I would say that, but he's actually talked about that a lot in interviews, in the Broken Skull Sessions podcast he did with Stone Cold back in November. So I'm glad they didn't really go into too much depth about that. It would have been nice, but it's not necessary. It's not really integral to the story, which takes place from 2017 to 2020. So that episode was all about really the build-up to WrestleMania 33 and the performance, the lackluster performance he had on that show, thinking that would be it for him. And again, this probably would have been a simple 24 special on Taker's final match, had they not continued to film him after that point, going into WrestleMania 34. So Chapter 2 was all about the redemption, him being built back up physically, mentally, emotionally, for that match with John Cena at WrestleMania 34. It went so well in his mind, despite not getting 30 minutes, as he originally expected. It went so well, he was ready for more. So we did more matches after that, which is where we start on this episode. A bit of a spoiler alert, but the fourth chapter will encompass WrestleMania 35, why he wasn't on it. And they made it sound like it wasn't his decision, they just didn't have any plans for him, which is really surprising, to be honest with you. Then again, I don't really blame them, because the Goldberg match was so bad. And granted, he kind of redeemed himself with the July Battleground, I think it was Battleground, or Extreme Rules, rather. That tag team match he had with Roman against Shane and Drew last summer. I mean, it was a good showing from him, but... that was actually after Mania 35. So the last time before we had seen him before Mania was on this episode with Crown Jewel. And he had such a terrible performance on that show, which I assume would be why they didn't bring him back for Mania. So anyway, that's in the next episode. I assume the fifth and final chapter will be all about the Boneyard match and how that could be. It could end up being his final match ever. So on this episode, we start off with him talking about the John Cena match from WrestleMania 34, which he felt really good about at the time. They kind of talked about that at the end of last week's episode, at the end of Chapter 2. He said, professionally, it was fine. Personally, it left me a little empty. Because he talked about how, he felt like he could have gone 20 to 30 minutes. He was in great physical shape. He had said on that last episode that was the best shape he's been in at least a decade. Close to 10, at least 8 to 10 years. He said probably since the first Shawn match in 2009. So close to 10 years. Now, I did say at the time with the Taker-Cena match, it was exactly what it needed to be. Because I really was not hoping for a longer match. Taker looked so bad in 2017. I had no desire to see a longer match from him at WrestleMania 34. That being said, I didn't know he was in as great of a shape as he was. So in retrospect, yeah, it was kind of a waste because he was more motivated here. He had more of a fire lit under him going into WrestleMania at 34 than he ever had at any other point leading up to then. In at least 10 years. So why waste that on a 2-minute match? Obviously, I would assume WWE knew that because Taker sent Vince the video of him getting ready. He seemed motivated. He seemed fired up about it. So why give the guy on a 5-hour plus show a 2-minute fucking match? That made no sense. In retrospect, that makes no sense to me. But he did say he thinks that he could have walked away. Had that match gone differently, had he not won or lost or whatever, but had they gone out there and had that show stealer of a match he feels they were capable of on that evening, then he thinks he could have walked away, but he didn't because it was a great performance, but it wasn't a match that you hang your hat on, you kind of ride off into the sunset to. It wasn't that final epic performance that he was hoping for. We actually see Michelle McCool after he comes backstage after the match. He's greeted by his wife, Michelle McCool, and his daughter, who looks exactly like him, by the way. Like, it's ridiculous how much she resembles her father. But we hear her say, "Oh, I don't believe that Daddy won." She couldn't believe it, which I thought was great. That popped me big. Because he had mentioned that anytime he wins, she's always asleep. But whenever he loses, she's always awake. So she must have been sleeping for... She must have been sleeping for WrestleMania 33. She must have been awake for WrestleMania 33, which I think she was. They showed her in the audience with Michelle. But she was sleeping for WrestleMania 32 and all the other matches he had in between then. Anyway, so he also talked about how he was torn because he was happy that she got to see him win. But at the same time, I guess her favorite is not The Undertaker, but rather John Cena. So he went out there and beat the crap out of John Cena. So not exactly her, maybe not the outcome she was hoping for, but she was happy that Daddy won. So we talked about how there was a fire lit underneath him that night and how he was ready to do more. He was ready to be a part of that next Saudi Arabia show, which was the very next month. I'm not sure if they announced him for that Saudi Arabia show because they announced the Saudi Arabia show like months in advance, all the way back to like mid-March. I don't think they announced Taker for the show just because they didn't know if he'd be wrestling on the show until after WrestleMania. So he said being a part of that not the Super Showdown show, what was it? The Greatest Royal Rumble. He said being a part of the Greatest Royal Rumble in Saudi Arabia was intriguing to him to be invited to the event, which was reportedly the case. I guess the Crown Prince or whatever, the Prince of Saudi Arabia, wanted Taker on that show, along with Yokozuna and the Ultimate Warrior, both of whom he did not get because, they're dead. But he did get Taker. So he didn't know how the casket match would be received because he doesn't really know when he brings back these gimmick matches, like maybe not the Inferno match. It's been years since he's been in one of those. But like, not Hell in the Cell, but like casket, buried alive matches. He doesn't know how people are going to like them or not like them because it's been so long since he's done them, He talks about how he can't take a match for granted anymore just because he's nearing the end of his career. And that match went well. They do show Rusev, if you're wondering. He was released recently, but they do show... how can you not? He was in the fucking match. He faced Rusev. It's like them not showing CM Punk in the WrestleMania 29 match that Taker had with him. How can you ignore that, They have before, I know, but thankfully they did not do that here. So they show him beating Rusev on that show. He said that he was so fired up and ready to do more. After WrestleMania 34, he kind of figured to himself, he kind of thought to himself, hey, I can kind of do more matches. Maybe not a full-time schedule, obviously, but he can do more matches. So he actually said that he was so amped up about it that he was in the middle of a vacation when he was asked about doing the MSG house show in early July of 2018. Now, the MSG house shows, they always try to make special by either doing a title change or bringing in a big name like The Undertaker or bringing in NXT people. They've always made them special. I was at an MSG house show right after Christmas, the day after Christmas in 2016, they brought back John Cena for that show. That was the first match John Cena had wrestled on in months. And it was at MSG. It was a pretty good show, too. I don't remember much about it, but I do remember that Cena was in the main event with Dean Ambrose and AJ Styles. So he left in the middle of a vacation to wrestle for WWE, because Vince asked him to headline Madison Square Garden in July of 2018. He called it a very special night. He said how MSG, the Garden, being lit up in purple that night in his honor was very special to him. He said, you always got to bring it to the Garden, because if you don't, the people will let you hear about it. And it's been a while since Taker had a piss-poor performance in the Garden. Granted, his WrestleMania 20 match with Kane wasn't amazing, but I don't remember the crowd shitting all over the match by any means. I think they were kind of more so enamored to see the dead man back after like 4 or 5 years. But he said you got to feed off the crowd, the energy of the audience, and it was nice to be out there with the young guys like Kevin Owens and Braun Strowman and Roman Reigns. He said he soaked it in that night, not knowing whether he would be back, knowing all the memories that he's had and that, not critically acclaimed. What do I mean? I'm talking about the historic, beloved Madison Square Garden. And he said, listen, if it's not special anymore, that's when you know it's time to walk away, which I completely agree with. And I think it was Triple H who had said, closure moments are great, because Taker at this point was looking for a match to end on. WrestleMania 34 wasn't it. The Saudi Arabia casket match with Rusev sure wasn't it. And this wasn't it either. To end on a house show, absolutely not. Not for The Undertaker. He didn't really feel closure on that evening. Everyone wants closure. And Triple H even brings up, which I've said God knows how many times here on the show and other places, that it's a catch-22, which he's absolutely hitting the nail on the head here when he says that when you have a great performance, it makes you want to go out there and have another one. But when you don't and the match sucks, you want to go back out there to redeem yourself. So it's a never-ending cycle. And Taker even said, these are the matches I do not want to end my career on. So we fast forward to September 18th in Austin, Texas, 2018. He's back at home. He said he shuts down the whole Taker persona, getting physically ready, blah, 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 when he's at home, and unless he gets a phone call to be ready for a specific show, which he does. He gets a call from Vince to face Triple H for the final time ever, as they called it, which it wasn't. He faced Triple H in a tag team match literally the very next month. I mean, maybe they meant the final one-on-one match ever, but they could have made that more clear. End of an era, my ass, from WrestleMania 28, which they talk about. They don't talk about how it was dumb to call it an end of an era when it really wasn't, because all three of those guys were back in the ring with each other like 8 years later, 6 years later at Crown Jewel 2018, which I'll get to momentarily. But anyway, Taker talks about how he shuts it down when he gets home, and he's always thinking about how hard it is to get ready. When he gets that call from Vince to do a match, in his mind he's thinking about, is it worth it? Is it worth it, getting ready for months and months and months, doing the match, and then physically, recuperating, rehabbing, doing the surgeries, all that stuff coming out of that one match? Is it worth it, is what he's asking himself. And for this match, it is. Triple H, we hear, he's talking about the history that he has with Taker, and how he knew about the aura that Taker had even when he debuted in the company way back when in, I almost said 2005, 1995 for Triple H. And by 2005, the reign of terror was already well within, happening by that point. We were well within the ruthless aggression era and the reign of terror from Triple H as World Heavyweight Champion in 2005. But no, he debuted in 1995. And how he said, he and Undertaker aren't like close the same way that he's close with Shawn Michaels, or the same way that Taker might be close with Kane, where he doesn't call Triple H on the phone every day. They don't text every day to check in how they're doing. But like Triple H meant enough to Taker for Taker to include Triple H in his wedding, which is pretty cool. It looked like early 2000s. I'm not sure when he got married. And I'm not talking about the Michelle McCool wedding either. I'm talking about, I think, the Sarah wedding, because Triple H looked pretty young when he was at Taker's wedding when they showed footage of that. But anyway, so he talked about how they're not the type of people to talk every single day. But at the same time, Taker has enjoyed immensely working with him over the years. And Triple H also brought up how, the matches that they had. And, Taker even says that he, admires Triple H so much to the point that he is most proud of the matches that he had with Shawn Michaels and Triple H, not over the course of the last 20 years, but specifically the WrestleMania 25, 26, 27, and 28 matches, that string of 4 matches from Mania 25 to Mania 28. Mania 28, I had a brain fart there for a second. Those are the matches that he's most proud of, Taker says. And we also hear from, let's see, I'm losing myself in my notes here. Taker talks about Shawn Michaels and the role that he played in those matches, and how, admittedly, he wasn't a big fan of Shawn Michaels early on in his career, but they had chemistry. They had great chemistry. Shawn Michaels never ceased to bring in the ring, whether it was back in the Attitude Era at Bad Blood 97, or it was WrestleMania, 25 over 10 years later. And Shawn Michaels talks about the chemistry that they had. And we also hear from Jim Ross, which is cool, who calls the WrestleMania 25 match, which he called, which I forgot about, a classic. And he's seen a lot of matches, but he said that Mania 25 match was nothing short of a classic. Taker really felt the pressure at WrestleMania 26 because he had the responsibility of wrestling Shawn Michaels' final match ever, streak versus career, at Mania 26. And he admires how Shawn Michaels, even after such a great match, and it was the match of the year for me in 2010, Taker talks about how he admires Shawn Michaels to be able to stay retired over the last 7 or 8 years. Very few people, if anyone, can actually say they've done that at such a level. But Shawn Michaels did, until he came back at the end of 2018, but I assume this was filmed prior to that point. So, anyway, Taker said that, or Triple H actually mentioned that it was Taker's idea for that story to continue. Now, I remember, that actually makes a lot of sense. Because Taker has brought up before, not Taker, but I remember reading reports well back in like late 2010, early 2011, that the plan for that Mania, which would make sense based off what I'm about to say, was Taker versus Wade Barrett. Now, that sounds terrible, I know. I doubt Barrett would have won. So how much good would it really have done for Barrett to lose to Taker at WrestleMania, coming off the two greatest matches of this guy's career, But it would make sense. It wasn't just a rumor. The Nexus, remember, randomly attacked Undertaker back at Bragging Rights 2010 to help Kane beat Taker in their casket match. The Buried Alive match. So they were clearly building for something. Wade Barrett ended up being a part of a fucking random-ass multi-man tag team match at the, at WrestleMania 27. They faced, Big Show and Kane and Santino and Kofi. What a fucking waste. After the year that guy had, what a waste. They got beat in like a minute. A complete burial of the core. So I guess by WrestleMania season, they kind of soured on that, and I guess WWE might have been looking for other ideas, and that's when Taker pitched, according to Triple H, the idea for the feud to continue with not Shawn Michaels, but Taker and Triple H, given how close they were, and Triple H was going to do what Shawn Michaels couldn't. And Taker talks about how beautiful of the storytelling was in that story they told over the course of those 4 years. And, they bring up how Shawn Michaels had clarity with that final match of WrestleMania 26. And Edge wants him to have that proper moment, to retire and not only have that moment, but realize that that's the moment that he should retire. So they continued the series of matches with WrestleMania 27. Triple H said, obviously, he felt the pressure of having to follow the Shawn Michaels matches for Manias 25 and 26. Granted, it was no Shawn Michaels versus Taker, and I didn't really originally like the Taker versus Triple H match at 27, but after going back and watching it, it was pretty damn good. Not my favorite match of theirs, but it was pretty damn good to kind of, lay the groundwork and build the bridge from 27 to 28, where they would, face off again for the third time at WrestleMania. This time with a Hell in a Cell stipulation, Shawn Michaels as the special guest referee. And they really, at WrestleMania 27, took the brutality to each other. They took it to another level. But at Mania 28, the Hell in a Cell they thought was the perfect way to end their story. Because it all started back at Bad Blood 97, as I mentioned earlier, and the first ever Hell in a Cell match between Taker and Shawn Michaels. Granted, they were feuding prior to that point, but the biggest, the In Your House match was a random-ass match. It was a good match, but it ended on a non-finish. This was really where the feud started. Hell in a Cell, Bad Blood, 97, October 5th, I believe it is. They just had amazing chemistry that night, and this time was no different. So it only made sense for this saga to conclude an end of an era, as they were calling it, which was bullshit ultimately, with Shawn Michaels as the special guest referee, and a Hell in a Cell stipulation with a Hell in a Cell cage surrounding them. So they recall the sweet chin music into the pedigree spot, and how Taker thought that there has never been a moment ever, I think it was Taker who said this, that people thought that the streak would end more so than they did in that moment, which he's absolutely right. Up to that point, I have never been more convinced that the streak was going to end. And we all figured Taker would win, but it was far from a guarantee. I remember having conversations with people going into WrestleMania 28 thinking, hey, this guy, he could lose. He could lose because Triple H has already lost twice before to this guy. Shawn Michaels has already lost twice before to this guy at WrestleMania. Triple H could win. So when Shawn Michaels hit that sweet chin music, Triple H immediately followed that up with the pedigree. What a great combination. The crowd was on their fucking feet. They thought it was over. What a great spot. What a great match. I love that match. One of my favorite WrestleMania matches ever between Taker and Triple H at WrestleMania 26. So anyway, Taker even said that the whole match was storytelling at its finest, and I completely agree. That stage shot of them in the end after Taker wins and goes 20-0, this really should have been it, in my opinion, for Taker, going 20-0. And after this shot specifically of Taker, Triple H, and Shawn on the stage, looking back at the crowd, it's one of Triple H's, or rather, not one of, it is Triple H's favorite moment, one of his favorite moments ever. I don't know if he said definitively his favorite moment, but it's definitely up there as one of his favorite moments in his entire career. And Taker kind of echoes those same thoughts. He said it was great because it was an organic moment that happened. And that picture that I think Triple H made for each of them, at least himself and Taker, maybe not Shawn, it's a picture that hangs above his office, not office, but his gym door to this day. And they showed a great shot of it here in this documentary, of the picture of it. And not only the picture of the moment, but also, and there was other stuff behind, like underneath it, like maybe a piece of the mat. I don't know what that was. But they had each of their signatures, and not, their autographs on the picture, which was really, really cool. So, they kind of fast forward back to present day and how he says that the expectation for this Super Showdown match, the last time ever, according to Vince, even though it wasn't, maybe one-on-one, but not like ever, period, because they had a tag team match the following month. They talk about how expectations for this Triple H Taker match in Melbourne were astronomical, because it's this marquee match. It's got to be good. And he said, though, that he had no added pressure because they were all close. Shawn Michaels was involved and Kane was involved at ringside. So, they were all close. So there really wasn't any added pressure for it to be good. And then we see him playing cards with the athletic trainer, Larry Heck. This seems like one of those moments that they would include as a bonus, as a sneak peek or whatever. But they included it in Chapter 3. And I'm glad they did because this was hilarious. So I've never heard of this guy, Larry Heck, before, the athletic trainer. But we hear Taker out of character talking about how he would boot people like Hornswoggle from the room, Big Show, even Tony Chimmel, thinking they were bad luck. I mean, that's just amazing. And even Heck says that Taker's a sore loser, which was hilarious. So, they talk about the Super Showdown match next and how it needed to be physical, it needed to be violent to kind of make up for the fact that it wouldn't be as good as it was 6 years ago at WrestleMania 28. He thinks that they did their jobs the right way in setting the stage for the next chapter at Crown Jewel. He thought it went well. He didn't rave about the match. He didn't shit on it. I thought it was a fucking snore fest. I was bored out of my mind watching that match at Super Showdown. I thought, and not as bad as the Crown Jewel match, but this was not much better. A 30-minute just bore fest, snore fest from Triple H and Taker. They should not have gone as long as they did. I know, Taker wanted 30 minutes of WrestleMania 34, and maybe it would have been a good idea. But in this type of environment with a much older guy in Triple H than John Cena, probably not the right way to go. So, Taker... This was one of the best parts of the entire episode. They show footage of Taker and Kane filming like the backstage videos, which we never really see, like the behind the scenes of how they film these videos. I thought they were just going to replay the video that we saw on Raw, leading up to the tag team match at Crown Jewel. They didn't, though. They showed a blooper where Kane goes, you said 3 words, are you ready, to Shawn Triple H. That's what you said to Shawn, and, he said he was ready, and now we have this match, blah, blah, blah. You have your 3 words. We have our 3 words. And Taker, they zoom out and you see Taker right next to Kane. And Taker goes, I thought he would say rest in peace, which was probably the original line. Or like, we are ready or whatever. He goes, go fuck yourself. I fucking died. I thought that was so great. And he goes, oh, why not use that? That was good. And it was just really, really funny. I want to see more footage like that on this type of, on this service on WWE Network. That's the type of footage that I want to see more of on this show. I thought that was amazing. For a 10-second clip, it was priceless. Not even that, you see Kane did the DX drop too. That was also equally amazing. So anyway, Kane said that he was intimidated by Taker when he first met him early on. But, Taker was always a big advocate for Kane, and how he said that WrestleMania 15 match that they had, Taker versus Kane, is arguably his favorite match ever. So they think very highly of each other. Taker even said that Glenn Jacobs, is one of the very few people, an elite few people, that he would lend his wallet to, knowing that, he'd be completely fine. Kind of expressing how trustworthy and how good of a person Glenn Jacobs is. And I got to meet Kane a couple of months ago at a big event, autograph signing in November. I completely agree. One of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. Actually, both of them. I met Taker at the subsequent big event, at the subsequent, convention thing back in March. The last public outing that I was in attendance for before this whole shit went down. Taker also, nice as could be. As nice as could be. The guy was awesome. So anyway, we hear from Triple H, who had said that he was surprised to hear that Shawn Michaels was indeed coming out of retirement for this tag team match, because he had pitched it to him or talked to him about it multiple times before. And Shawn would always say, not no, or like, oh, think about it. He would always say, absolutely not. So the fact that he was coming out of retirement for this really surprised both him and The Undertaker, who never thought he would wrestle again. But, Shawn Michaels, the deal breaker for him was that he liked being in the ring with Triple H. He liked being in the ring with Taker. He liked being in the ring with Kane. So for him, it made sense to come out of retirement for this one final match, a crown jewel. And then he knew going in it would be a one-off. It was always meant to be a one-off. It was never meant to be like, oh, come out of retirement for this one final run. Granted, that was the mindset behind the, SummerSlam 02 match with Triple H. That was always also meant to be a one-off. And it was a one-off. That was the longest one-off of all time, because he didn't retire again until WrestleMania 26, 8 years later. Unfortunately, it's probably because that match was so good. This match was so fucking bad. And he's not like Taker, where he felt the need to redeem himself. The match was so bad, he's like, yeah, I'm done. That's it for me. And I wish he did have a couple more matches, because listen, if you're going to come out of retirement and that's going to be your final match, he really should have stayed retired. I mean, it goes without saying, but he really should have stayed retired. That just kind of goes without saying. If this was the type of match that we were going to get. It sounded like fun to Shawn Michaels to do the match, and, he thought he could do it, but it was just a complete disaster. Triple H called Crown Jewel just a bad comedy movie all the way around. That's how bad this match was in his opinion. Because he tore his pec, like early on in the match. He got tossed over the rope by Taker or someone, Kane or whatever. He got thrown over the top rope, and he tore his pec after his arm got caught up in the rope. So his pec got torn. Shawn was in disbelief. Kane's mask fell off, which was fucking embarrassing. Taker looked like shit. Shawn Michaels was the star of that match, and the guy had not wrestled in nearly a decade. How sad is that? We all thought that Shawn may not look too good because he's a lot older now, but he was actually the star of the match, which goes also to show how just bad everyone else looked, and it was just, again, a complete fucking train wreck. Triple H even says it could not have gone any worse than it did. Taker said it was a total disaster. It was a total train wreck. The match sucked. Shawn Michaels agrees with both of them and says, yeah, it blew. The match blew. Didn't make him want to. It didn't make him to want to come out of retirement again to redeem himself. He was like, yeah, that's probably it for me. If that's what it's gonna be, then no thanks. If it was like a one-off match with AJ and the match was amazing, then he might have come back for more matches. But because, with this and it was so bad, he's like, yeah, I'm just gonna quit while I'm ahead, or rather behind, because the match was so bad. But anyway, where was I in my notes here? Taker says that he just was not there mentally, and he credits that to just having family issues at the time. Him and Michelle, not together, but they were having some family issues with their extended family, and it really was taking a toll on him. He had that dark cloud hanging over his head. So had it not been for those issues, he thinks that it would have gone well. And had it gone well, it may have been enough for him to call it a career. But of course, it wasn't, because the match was so bad that he had to come back again. And this is where we wind it down here, where we wrap it up. Michelle says that, she knew as soon as that pay-per-view aired, and she knew how bad his performance was watching from home. I think she was home. She wasn't there, I would assume. She knew it would be a vicious cycle all over again. Shawn Michaels said it was like chasing the dragon. At a certain point, you gotta stop, dude. And that at a certain point, it just reaches levels of just being unhealthy. You just got to stop. What are you doing? Michelle thinks that WrestleMania 33, that match with Roman, despite how bad it was, really could have been it, but he wasn't ready to wrap it up yet. He was not ready to hang up the boots. And she knows that he wants closure, and he will not stop until he gets that closure. Jim Ross even says that he knows Father Time does no jobs. Father Time never loses a match. He's catching up to Mark Calloway quick. So Taker better stop before it catches up to him. And it arguably already has, but before it get worse than it already does. Which I agree with. We hear from Vince, and I forgot what he had said exactly, but he had said, it becomes a question of, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? I have to stop. You think, Vince? You think? That might be a question you got to ask yourself, but I digress. Shawn Michaels says that, again, at a certain point, things with the misses at home are just going to start to disintegrate. You got to stop. Your family life will suffer if you just keep going and going and going. And he knows more than anyone. Not that I don't think he had many marital issues, but, he would know better than anyone if he felt like he was going to retire in 07, 08, which he almost did retire in 08, but he didn't. That type of thing. So he was happy, or not happy, but he's hoping that Taker can be happy and find that closure before it gets a lot worse at home than it already is. And Taker says, it's one of those matches where I come out of and I think to myself, I know I have to make some life changes. If this is how life is going to be, the issue might not be my in-ring style or whether I can go anymore or whatever. It might not be the match's fault. It might just be my fault. Why am I not ending it while I'm still ahead? I thought that was a great way to close it out. They did show a quick sneak peek of episode chapter 4 coming up on June 14th, the day of Backlash. So unfortunately, we got to wait another 3 weeks for the rest of this thing, but I am looking forward to it. So chapter 4, like I said earlier, will be all about how he's not at WrestleMania 35 and the Goldberg Super Showdown match, which was so not just bad, but concerning. Because they both got hurt. Goldberg had his belt. Someone could have died. I hate to exaggerate, but with Taker dropping Goldberg on his head, he could have fucking died. Taker was out of it. It was just a bad match. So I'm very interested to see what they have to say about that. Goldberg, we know, hated that match. And that he had to come back. A lot like Taker at SummerSlam that year to redeem himself. He had to. I feel like Goldberg's the same way. Dude, just go out after you have a good match. He should have retired after WrestleMania 33. He came back. He should have retired after that Dolph match last year at SummerSlam. He came back for the Braun match, which sucked. Just fucking hang it up, dude. It's not as bad as Taker because he's not working as many matches as Taker. But at a certain point, you just gotta stop. I don't think he gives a fuck about closure. I mean, he cares about the money, but it is still sad to say. So they have that match. They talk about that on episode 4 on chapter 4. And then again, after that, I assume that WrestleMania 36 and the Boneyard match will be what episode 5, chapter 5, that's what that one's going to be all about. So this is absolutely excellent. Again, the shortest episode so far at 45 minutes in length. It feels like 5 minutes. It's great stuff. I cannot say that enough. I cannot praise this documentary enough for being as good as it is. So check out episodes 1, 2, and 3 right now on the WWE Network, specifically Chapter 3 after you're done with episodes 1 and 2, entitled End of an Era. Albeit not really, although I assume that title was too long. But anyway, guys, thank you as always for checking out the video. I appreciate it. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. The aforementioned playlist of all the Dead Man of the Undertaker, the Last Ride reviews are down below in a playlist. So down below in the description box, click on that for my reviews of Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 respectively. As for the daily content coming up tomorrow here on the channel is the latest installment in the MCU Rewatch Review series covering Captain America, the First Avenger. Chris Mueller and I have a lot to say about Captain America, a near 1 hour podcast. That's already been recorded, so that's going up earlier on tomorrow, so check that out. Beyond that, I'm not exactly sure what's going up on Tuesday. I'm not sure what's going up on the WWE Network. So if not, it might be a Dark Side of the Ring review or something else. But otherwise, guys, have a great one. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. I'm Graham G. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.